Susie. It reminds me the story of this person who passed away. And it's his funeral, and his soul leaves his body. And he stopped halfway to look at his funeral, and he heard what Susie just said and said, "That's the wrong funeral and the wrong place." So, you're too kind. Thank you. Well, it's been it's been a privilege to work this whole year. When Susie asked me to join the board of the Global Spine Wellness Summit, she told me, "Philippe, it's a 1-hour call every month." And yeah, it's a little more than that. But anyway, it was a privilege. Also, I would like to say that I'm so happy to be back in Aspen. Aspen is an important part of my life. The first time I came in Aspen was an amazing trip. It is back in 1979, and I received an award from the French government. And we were 3 to have an award, and the Prime Minister of France at the time, Raymond Barre, took us to Aspen, to the Aspen Institute. And that's the first time, 1979, I came here. And imagine, 1979, I was just 30, and you arrive in Aspen Institute with your Prime Minister, and you have dinner with Margaret Thatcher. But then I learned so much in Aspen. So I would like to thank the Aspen Institute with all the good it did to me. Particularly the fact that it, since I left school for a long period of time, I did not read any book other than novels or management books, and it taught me how management books were stupid, but how good were the readings of the classics. And we're going to do some of that today. One last piece on Aspen is somebody probably none of you know, but with Peter Rommel, who is here in this room, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. We have been very instrumental in designing Euro Disney. And you'll be interested to know that half of the design of Euro Disney was done here at the Jérôme Hotel, with 20 architects from around the planet. It was a very, and this can only happen in Aspen. So now I should stop, because otherwise I'm going to pass my time. I could talk a long time on Aspen. Susie, Richard Dussault, and I, with the help of the board, organized a few what we call salon dinners, which took place in the US. We had 3 dinners in the US. Then we had one took place organized by one of our board members in India, and in Asia, and the last one in Europe. And the idea of those dinners is you assemble 15 to 20 people of different horizons, some of them from the spy industry, some of them not at all related to the spy industry. And you try to understand what are their concerns, preoccupations, what they would like to hear or talk about. And that's how, in fact, we did not do the agenda. The outcome of the dinners, the agenda became like very obvious. What really fascinated me as the result of those dinners is 2 things. One, the consistency of the answers, whether we are in Europe, in Asia, United States. Everybody, no exception, wants to understand the world better, in general. And this came like really across the board. That's the first thing. And the second thing is but that's not proper to the spine wellness industry, is a lot of discussion on, where do we go from here? What is the next spa generation? Are we innovating or not? And this assessment that, no, we're not innovating enough. And therefore, the theme of imagination became very obvious. So that's why you have this theme, innovation through innovation. So this morning, I have a difficult task, which is to link 2 things, understand the world or imagine the world. Now, obviously, I will reach my conclusion right away. I'll tell you, you understand soon why. I think it's much easier to imagine the world than to understand the world. particularly after what I'm going to tell you. So again, the theme of this little presentation was not obvious. But fortunately, geopolitics is one of my passions. And I'm also fortunate that I had very good teachers or mentors in this respect. A few years ago, some of us at Davos created a little small virtual think tank. And we work, it's a very, very limited staff who is connected with in excess of 750 people worldwide who are experts, analysts, politicians, searchers, and so on. And we can address all sorts of subjects. We publish a monthly barometer every month, which is like what was important this month. This is called the monthly barometer. And its track record is impressive. And just a personal anecdote. Back in 2007, we had a conference call. And Jose Maria Figueres, who is here with us today, who is part of the monthly barometer, we had a call with him and a few colleagues. The call, because of time difference, was just outside a restaurant in Washington. So I took the call on a sidewalk before biking back home. And the call was so negative about what was going to happen that, again, I bike not directly home, but I kind of biked around a little bit in Washington. The weather was nice. Arrived home, and it really bugged me. And the day after, I called my banker, and I moved all of my personal financial investment, except those I have in businesses like Revolution and some of the businesses, all of my investment in cash. This was at the end of 2007, the best investment I ever made. So obviously, Thierry Malray, who runs this, has helped me making the presentation today. So I will I'll do my best to try to explain you some of the key trends in the world. And we will start with long-term being 2050. So don't panic when I tell you a few things. That's not for tomorrow morning. Okay? But it's good to be aware of some of those drastic changes which are going to happen, or some simple facts. And then we'll talk about short, medium term, and then I will explain you why imagination becomes so important. So, the word today, long term. Fasten your seatbelts, we will take off now. Traditional economics are challenged. The American model of a credit consumption-led economy will be coming to an end. Also, the Chinese model of an economy built on export-led growth based on an undervalued currency is also coming to an end. The two main pillars of the Western world economy since World War II, one, robust economic growth, raising living standards for all in the US, and two, the welfare states and income redistribution in most of Europe are shaking. And the scale of the challenge now facing most Western economies is of very significant proportion. New partnerships. The end of the transatlantic partnership. Most of us in this room, were born or raised at the time where the transatlantic alliance was very key to our world. Now it's not only that the US and China are very dominant players, but the fact that America's interest in Asia are rising while its interest in Europe are declining. Europe and the US are already partying on a number of structural and key issues because their strategic interest starts diverging. This is why time will come for Europeans to think of the unthinkable. The natural transatlantic partnership will someday come to an end. And this is extremely fundamental, not only for Europe, obviously, but also for the US. The planetary boundaries, third subject, are being challenged with uncertain consequences. As we know, the borders today are not the same as they were just 20 years ago. Key security alliances were all built in the aftermath of World War II and are becoming much less relevant and flawed by severe structural inadequacies. In particular, the authority of the pillars of the global architecture, Bretton Woods institutions, World Trade Organization, WTO, NATO, and even the United Nations are not relevant to deal with the issues we're not talking about. Globalization is the one piece of good news, despite what a lot of people are saying, we had in the last few years. Globalization, we tend to forget, took 2 billion people out of poverty on the planet. But with soon, 2050, that's not very long, 2 more billion people on the planet, almost all of them from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, we have a formidable challenge. First, obviously, in terms of climate, global warming, we'll address it with Jose Maria later, but also water supply, food scarcity, and obviously immigration. 2 more billion people south. Formidable challenge, demographic. The relative demographic weight of the population, and this should be a change of mentality in the Western world. Today, the Western world population represents just a little short of 20% of the world population. By the way, it was 30% not long ago. By 2050, it's going to be only 12% of the world population. And this is not reflected anywhere or in any organization today. Last, we have a remarkable global tension underway. On the one side, a very, very positive trend, huge innovation and technological advancement. Human innovative capacity is at an unprecedented height. And on the other hand, very rapid social changes everywhere on the planet. Change and transformation. And this tension is occurring, obviously, in a very complex environment where many of our traditional structures, as we just said, and assumptions are eroding. So that's for the long term, a few key facts. Now, short and medium term. The world globally is currently suffering from a lack of aggregate demand. The combination of too much debt and too little growth is pushing countries into a classic debt trap. By the way, our think tank back years ago was already addressing this issue of debt, sovereign debt, at a time where no analyst, no specialist, no expert, no journalist was addressing it. The world, the Western world, has been living above its means for the last 35 years. And the old bag of tricks that countries have typically used to manipulate their fiscal and monetary policies and spur economic growth just don't work anymore. Fiscal pressure will make economic conditions stressed for an extended period of time. Also, policymakers will face difficult trade-off between the need for fiscal discipline and the rising demand of the social environment. So the consequence is that political volatility will prevail, and we start seeing it. It's very interesting to see in Europe and in the US, by the way, a little less in Asia, or not yet, the fact that the extreme, whether it's extreme liberal or extreme conservative, or in Europe, extreme right versus extreme left and so on, globally, used to be about 10% of the voters only 15 years ago, and today represents about 35% of the voters. Kind of interesting evolution. At a time where income inequality is such a prominent issue all around the world, there is new academic research, which, by the way, is debated, so I'm not saying that's absolutely right. There is a big debate. But it shows that this inequality is one of the origin of financial crisis. Macroeconomic policies trying to compensate for this inequality through fiscal deficits, more redistribution, and this is happening almost everywhere, very low interest rate, and undervalued foreign exchange, except for the euro, by the way, are not sustainable in the long term and lead to crisis. As a result, the worldwide phenomenon of what is called indignation. Very interesting to note that, I'm not mentioning it because he's French, but he happened to be French. Stéphane Hessel is a French diplomat, 93 years old. He went into a concentration camp during the war. He started as a low-level civil servant in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He became a diplomat, worked at the United Nations, and was one of the co-writers of the Human Rights Declaration. Stéphane Hessel, 93, wrote a manifest in 2010 called Indignez-vous, Rise Up. He sold, this is a little book. By the way, you can, it's translated, you can buy it on Amazon. No advertising, sorry. On your iPad. It sold more than 1 million copies in France in the first 3 months. 1 million copies is the best possible. France has 60 million inhabitants. 1 million copies in just 3 months. And this book has been translated in 20 different languages. And this is the reason and the origin why you have those indignation movements from Israel to London, from Madrid to Chile, from Washington, by the way, they are camping next to the White House, see them every day when I'm there, to China. And this is just the beginning of Rise Up. Interesting phenomenon. Unemployment. I'm going to take only one example, which is the US. But obviously, unemployment is currently structurally a little better in Asia, even though they are not as advanced in terms of employment as the Western world. And obviously, the problem is more significant even in Europe. But to take figures, because they are debated currently in the US with the new statistics published last week. We keep talking about the rate of unemployment, 8.1% last month, which is 1.1% below what it was at the end of the crisis 2.5 years ago. But we forget to talk about the level. What is the level? The United States created 1.1 million jobs in the last 3 years, but 8 million jobs were destroyed in 18 months during the crisis. And we're not even close to getting back to this level. The US economy continues. First, the European economy, as we all know, I'll do a brief tour. European economy is in a dire strait. I mean, there is no other words. And the growth, the forecasted growth for the next 2 or 3 years, depending on what is the organization doing it, is anything between negative, continued recession, to maybe 1% growth. The US continue to do better than Europe, but at a very slow pace. The Fed of Minneapolis is specialized, I don't know why, by the way, but is specialized in tracking economic performance for each recovery. And just published some research showing that the current recovery is the weakest of the last 11 recoveries we had in the last 60 years. And I will not bother you with figures, but basically, the recovery in terms of GDP growth in the last 3 years or employment growth, whatever, is about 1/4 what it was on average in the previous 11 recoveries. Massive injection of liquidity, which is used everywhere without exception, improves feelings, but does not resolve any of those issues, any of the underlying issues. They are a painkiller, but they are not a cure. So that's a lot. Now, I'm going to make things a little more complicated. What makes those matters more challenging is that the issues are becoming more global every day. I remember the time when, let's say, a problem happened in Aspen 50 years ago. The solution was in Aspen. Today, if a problem happened in Aspen, probably the likelihood of finding a solution in Aspen is 0. because it's linked to problem elsewhere and interdependence. So we have, and I'll see the first chart. So I need to push the button. Here it is. So increased interdependence, everything is connected, size and magnitude of the events, and time compression, things move faster and faster. So I'm going to elaborate 2 minutes on this. Magnitude, after what I told you, you probably understand that the issues or challenge are of significant magnitude. Interconnectivity. Now, I'm not a statistician, so I took those figures from those people who make statistics. I hope they're right. I didn't check them. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, and here's how. Today, the key parameters are economic, geopolitical, environmental, and societal. And in each of those, you have a number of sub-bubbles, if you want. And this is a selection of the key ones, but you have more. Not only each of the red or orange bubbles are connected to each of the other ones in the circle, but they're also connected to each of the blue bubbles and each of the yellow bubbles and each of the green bubbles. So statistically, when you look within a circle, it's a geometric event. When you now link the circle, the 4 circles together, it becomes exponential. So statistically, 4 elements with 6 links equal 64 patterns. 10 elements with 45 links equals 35 billion patterns. Systemic linkage amplifies the impact of armless events, as the subprime mortgage crisis showed us. This is what also, by the way, it's not linked to this chart specifically, but today in France starts the guy, the trader who cost 5 billion euro to Société Générale is going to court today, 2 weeks after 2 billion thing was found at JP Morgan. That's the reason. They don't understand what they're doing. Who would understand, by the way? You see? In the same spirit, things are moving faster and faster. And just to relax the atmosphere for 2 minutes, I'll give you 3 or 4 figures. Every minute on Earth, 256 babies are born. 750 smartphones are activated. 24 hours of videos are uploaded on YouTube, and 19,000 tweets are tweeted. So things move fast. A lot of work was done on speed by a philosopher called Paul Virilio. He published, among other works, a book on speed and politics. We'll offer it to the governor of Colorado tomorrow. And he developed a theory called drobology, but I'm not going to bother you with that. It's hard to summarize one book, as important as this one, in one quote, but I'm going to try to do it. So here's what he says. The speed of light does not merely transform the world, it becomes the world. Globalization is the speed of light. In short, the connectivity and complexity we have as a world engendered in the global landscape transcend our ability to comprehend, model, or manage events. And that's the big issue today. So let me show you the next chart. When you link everything, here it is, no. Here it is. That's for one situation only. You can, for any situation, you can do the same chart. And a friend of ours with Jose Maria has done a model trying to do it, but even the model is not powerful enough. So if you try to understand what you do, that's what you get. An American economist, Herbert Simon, who got a Nobel Prize in 1978, wrote or developed a principle called bounded rationality back in 1957. So this is way before globalization and before the world got so complex. And basically, I'm going to quote him, "The capacity of the human mind for formulating and solving complex problems is very small compared to the size of the problem, whose solution is required for objectively rational behavior in the real world." And I will not go on because it could take us a long time, but he therefore criticizes the so-called scientific management approach for relying too much on rationality. I'll stop here. I had a discussion last night with John Kao, who you're going to see later. I was kind of sharing with him what I would tell you this morning, and this thing here. And he said, "Philippe, that's an interesting subject." And there's a guy called Churchman who developed the concept of wicked problems. But basically, it's dealing with the same type of issue. So we have the same issues in our world. It's not only applies to politics, it applies to companies, it applies to the spa and wellness industry, where things are getting more and more complex. So what is the answer to this overwhelming complexity? First, being humble and recognize it. So many people pretend to understand everything. Now, when you look at this, you don't. So being humble. Secondly, and I think that Deborah is going to talk to us about it when she talks, wellness is very fundamental. If we are healthy people, we think well. If we are living a certain way, so wellness can help in understanding or acting maybe more rationally. But last is obviously imagination. So I'll give you one last quote. "Imagination rules the world. The vice of our modern institutions is that they do not speak to the imagination." Now, who said that? Napoleon. 1815. Are our politicians speaking enough to the imagination? I'm not sure. What about entrepreneurs, CEOs, marketing executives, marketers? Not sure either. And is the spa and wellness speaking enough to the imagination? Not sure either. Good subjects for today and tomorrow. I personally believe, and then I'll share some personal thoughts before I conclude. I personally believe that true innovation does not mean surveying the voters or the consumer. Whether we are politicians or business people, should not give the public only what it wants. We must imagine what it would like. And I'm lucky enough that I've been working in companies which were founded by people who had this imagination. Obviously, Amy was talking about Steve Jobs, so who is the current natural example. But let me tell you to a few of those companies I've been working with, I had the privilege to work with. Disney. Walt Disney would have made a market survey to check whether a theme park would ever work. Then Disneyland would not exist. I worked 14 years for a company called Accor. And I joined Accor when Accor had 20 motels in France. They had 4,000 hotels. They were called Novotel hotels. And Novotel is the first hotel which was built 20 miles away from the city in the middle of beet fields, thinking that it was better to be outside the city in a comfortable and clean room rather than in a crappy hotel with no plumbing downtown. Market survey for a hotel in beet fields would never have said yes. Gerard Blitz created Club Med back in 1949, 4 years after the end of the war, and after himself and his family got deported, and decided that he wanted French people, German people, Italian, Spanish, and so on, go together, play music, drink wine, chat up girls or boys, whatever, in the Balearic Islands, and he created Club Med. No market survey would have told him he was right. Same happened Pierre Omidyar when he founded eBay. Same happened at Miraval when Miraval was created, or Zipcar when it was created, and so on and so forth. I could go on. So that's the power of imagination. So now let's imagine, and as we say in French, let's walk watching the moon rather than walk watching your shoes. I'll give you, obviously, it would be pretentious to talk about how can we imagine the world here, right? Plus, we could talk a few hours about this, so Susie would remind me that I'm not on time. So I'm just going to tease one subject and show you how imagination can play on one subject, which we're going to address tomorrow with John Kewa and Peter Rommel, which is the city, healthy city and the city of tomorrow, and show you how imagination can play. And before I do show you the video, I would like to share with you what Bill Clinton told me recently. It was about a month ago. And by the way, we were talking about the Global Spine Wellness Summit, one of the subjects, and imagination. And he said, as you know, he's the hero of collaboration, and he thinks that collaboration is the way to imagination. And he gave me the example, which honestly I did not know, of San Diego, where a small group of people decided to change the city. And between one or two business executives, the mayor, the dean of the university, and so on, they decided to move in the gem sales field. And because those people, non-partisan, because they decided to collaborate versus fight and whatever, they made San Diego the world capital of gem sales. That's a very interesting example. So before this video, the video shows an award which the TED conference has given. TED conference gave an award to individuals traditionally since they were, it was done 7 years ago. For the first time, instead awarded a concept. And the concept is called City to Zero. Watch. Now, there is so much talent in this room, assembled for the next 2 days. Spa, wellness, people, executive entrepreneurs, architects, designers, cosmetic firms, equipment, and so on. There is enough talent that I think between this summit and the next one, we could do Spa Wellness 2.0. Now it's time to conclude. So instead of a conclusion, some music. There is no imagination without music. In fact, Nietzsche said, I know the one in French, but I'll translate in English, without music, life would be a mistake. So what I'm going to show you now is a video from a foundation, an organization called Playing for Change, who is trying to help putting people together and make progress on the planet through development of music and art. And what they do is they assemble street artists from all around the planet around one song. They did a number of songs, but I picked this one very specifically for you today.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace.
You might say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Thank you.